I'm Sherry Kendall, and welcome to Hometown Salutes. Today I have a very special guest. It is Dave, Councillor. Welcome, Dave, to the show.
Thank you.
So tell us a little bit about yourself. Were you born and raised here in Fayette County?
Yes, I was.
And you went to school at Connersville High School?
Yes, I did.
Okay. So at what point did you decide to go into the service? Was it right after high school?
No. I contemplated going into service for a while. Almost went in '72 with some of my buddies, that I ran around with, but they were a couple years older. But I hung it out a little longer than that, and I got married young, and I was working for my brother's tire shop at CNC Tire back in the day, and I felt that there was more to life than changing tires and all that, and I was a common adventurer anyway, and so that's why I decided to go in the Army.
Okay, so why the Army?
Well, I was interested in the military police. I always wanted to be a police officer.
Okay.
For a long time, and but I didn't want to be nothing against any reserve officers or anything else. I either wanted to be a full officer and work as one, or not at all. And so I went and visited the recruiters, and long story short, they took me down to AFES down in Cincinnati and went through all their testing and all this and physicals and everything else, and I passed, and I also had to score pretty high to get on in the military police to get in that school and everything else. And so in '76, I went in July of '76. I went into United States Army.
Okay. Did you come from a military family?
Yes, I have 5 brothers and 2 sisters. There are only one sister and one brother left, but 4 of my brothers, out of 8 kids, 2 were active, and 2 were active reserves in the National Guard. And so I had a brother retire out of there, and then I had another brother that was in the Korean War, and the one that was retired, he went in right after the Korean War. And so, yeah, I had a lot of military influence, so to speak,
Okay.
with the Army.
Were your parents supportive that you went in, and was your wife supportive that you went in?
Yes. I was I got married in '73, and I had a little girl. My wife did anyway. And so we were looking for a new adventure, new opportunities and stuff, and we just need to go out of Connersville for a while.
Okay. So basic training, where did you go for there, and how long was basic training?
That was Fort Knox, Kentucky. Back when I went in the Army, everybody went to infantry basic training first. Nowadays, it's a one-stop where you go, if you're going to be an MP or armor or whatever, you go to that base where your advanced training is going to be. So they'll train you from the time you get there to be a tanker or infantry or whatever. But back then, everybody went through infantry training.
Okay.
And then you went to either school to be whatever you're going to be. So that was Fort Knox, Kentucky, and it was about 8 weeks, 8 to 10 weeks, something like that.
So was it hard?
Yeah, it was an education. Yes, it was. Yes, it was. All my drill sergeants were Vietnam veterans, freshly from Vietnam. Vietnam technically got over with in '75, about May, I do believe. And so I was in there with all my drill sergeants were infantry Vietnam vets.
Oh, wow.
And they weren't real happy with the way the war ended because of the kind of like what happened with we pulled out of Afghanistan. Well, we pulled out of Vietnam after 15 years and lost roughly 64,000 people. And it was like all these people gone, all these soldiers and men and women, and it's just they had some. It reflected their attitude toward things. And so, and they reflected their attitude towards us.
So it was rough.
Yeah, it was they were still there, and they were trying to keep us alive. And when in our training, it was all based a lot around jungle training and Vietnam. And they would refer to if this would happen to you, then or you get into something like this and you don't do this right or whatever, you're going to be killed. And so that was instilled in us quite a bit. It was pretty rough back then. I learned a lot of new words and meanings and from the drill sergeants, and I was telling you a little while ago, if I had to think of any type of a TV show or a movie that reflected what basic training was back then and probably before, it would probably be Full Metal Jacket. That was close.
Okay.
And they didn't let off on nothing. I mean, you got cussed out, and we got it all. So
I can't imagine what you think. I mean, I'd be like, what in the heck am I doing?
I felt like I was in prison.
Yeah. And didn't even do anything wrong.
But I was carrying a rifle, and I just couldn't understand that.
So that was basic training. So then after training, that's when you went to the specialty school?
Fort McClellan, Alabama.
Okay.
And that is a MP school back then. Down there, they call it an academy today, but back then it was MP school. And Fort McClellan, it was a military base. It was also they trained the chemical, biological, and radiological school there. Oh. And also WACS, all the Women's Army Corps, they were there. Before Fort McClellan, it was Fort Gordon, Georgia, and then it went to McClellan, and I think today it's in Leonard Wood, Fort Leonard Wood. But they had to close that post back in '79 for a lot of reasons, and it was contaminated. Oh. And so, well, that's another subject, but everybody that went there for any amount of time, or were stationed there or trained there, it was similar to what went on with the Marines at their base in was it North Carolina or South Carolina, wherever.
Okay.
And but they want to keep it hush.
Right.
So, but they're not hushed. I mean, but that's they got another situation going on with that.
So how long is that schooling?
That lasted about 8 weeks.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then when you passed that schooling, where did you go at that point?
Well, I come back home for about 60 days, what they call TDY, and I came back and I was a recruiter's aide. Oh. And so, and the recruiters wanted me to dress up in my garb, my white hat and my uniform and everything with MP started on, MP and all that, and then go around and help recruit. And it was, I did that for 60 days. Then after that, I got stationed at Fort Polk, Louisiana. Okay. And a lot of people, that used to be called Tigerland. That was one of the stops before Vietnam. And it was like, it's got swamps and forests and stuff like that, but the environment there was a lot like Vietnam. And so that was, it's a real nice place for people like fishing and hunting and stuff like that. But if you're a city slicker and you want to go down there, people hated it. Yeah. 100% humidity. Ugh. And it was hot and humid a lot. Yeah.
So what was going on in the country when you joined? Vietnam was just finishing up.
Vietnam had finished up, and Ford was the president when I went in, President Ford. And okay. Then Jimmy Carter got elected president, and so not much was going on. It was like a calm era between conflicts. Okay. Although they trained all the time as if we're going to get into it with somebody else. And we went from a lot of jungle training and stuff like that to started to go into a lot of desert training. And this is back in the late 70s. Okay. So But me, I was a military policeman, and I was doing, well, first off, I was with the 5th Infantry Division. And the 5th Infantry Division, we had 3 MP companies, and with the 5th Infantry Division MP company was what I was in. And although we were all together in the same area with the other MP companies, we did road duty, and we also went to the field a lot and trained out there, because military police has a lot of responsibilities. And so we would go train and for like a month and come back and work the road like regular police officers on the street. And let you know that in military installations, whether it's an Air Force base, Navy, or Army, an Army base especially, you can drive like 50, 60 miles and out on the ranges. You know, I'm here in Indianapolis and on training areas and stuff where they're shooting artillery, big guns and stuff like this, and they land, you know, 15 miles away and stuff like this. But the inside the post itself is like a city, and it is a city. I mean, it's a military city, and you have the same crime there as you do any place else. You have armed robberies, you have rapes, you have thefts, you have it all right there. And bar fights, the bar, they have EM clubs and NCO clubs and officers clubs, and you get into bar fights and just kind of like Connersville, you know, as far as, and the towns they vary in size, but they have gas stations and movie theaters and you name it, shopping center, PXs and all this, and grocery stores and all this. It's really a city, like a little bitty city, and not little. It's pretty good size for, you know, compared to towns, you know, or bigger in Connersville, for instance.
Right.
You know, and but they're spread out a lot too. But we had to answer calls, and just like here in Connersville or Richmond or Indianapolis or wherever, and you get everything, and you get all these people from all over the country, whether you're from in the Appalachian Mountains, or you're in the streets of New York City, Chicago, or St. Louis, and you get all these different people together, and folks from the country. There's some conflicts. Yeah, there's a lot of conflicts. So, yeah, it was an education.
So what would a work day be like for you? Like, did you start, I mean, I guess, did you work all shifts?
No, we would, yeah, I have. Yeah, we used to work all the different shifts and everything else, and you just go into the Provost Marshal's office, which is the MP station, and you know, just you go to your orderly room or your company area, to their orderly room, which is the arms room, and you get issued your weapon and your rounds. And then you would go to the. You also we had you had to get your badge too, because you've got your badge, your gun, and everything, and then you go to the for a guard mount. And a guard mount's where you all stand out there and getting inspected, and your shoes and all that and everything. Your gig line's all straight and looking good and everything. And you would. Have your weapons checked and everything else, and then you'd get on in your Jeep or your car or whatever, and you would be assigned a district, and that's where you'd go, just like a regular city police. Yeah.
Yeah.
Then when we went out on the field, we had traffic control points. We had a lot of convoy escorts. And like in back in like World War II, and I imagine World War I also, especially World War II, and always in Vietnam also, the MPs would escort convoys through very bad areas, and then when they got ambushed, guess who got shot first? The MPs.
Yeah.
So that was a big thing, but we had our jobs out in the field, and the plain Army, so to speak, and then we had our jobs on our, what they call garrison duty, patrolling the streets and stuff like that. I was kind of fortunate that I would, like I said, I was a division MP. I was with the infantry division, but they would take certain ones out of every MP company, because the other two other companies, the MP companies, one was a garrison unit and they did a lot of administrative stuff, and the other MPs were also a combat unit, but they were a support group for the 5th Division, and they would take off and do their own thing with other Army groups. And but anyway, they would take members of the different soldiers and stuff from different companies and put them in the provost marshal's office doing things. And it's because we have the military police has you got your patrols and combat MPs, and then you had MPI, was detectives, and CID, and then I got chosen to work traffic. And when I say traffic, I was in the traffic division investigating serious injury and fatalities and military vehicles. And so it's anything with a fatality, a serious injury, or a military vehicle, either on or off post, we investigated it. And that was pretty...
that would be interesting.
Yeah, when I got assigned to them, and also I went through, I sent you a picture earlier.
Yes.
Well, I'm one of the few probably in the Army back then, and I will say a few. I know there's out there, I don't know if everybody in the world will be seeing this, but there's a lot of us that rode motorcycles. And we had to go through a 80-hour course of, and California Highway Patrol was our lesson plan, when the CHIPS was real big on TV back then.
Yeah.
But we're riding Harley at electric lights. And we were trained with the Louisiana State Police, and then some of the other parishes, that are not counties down there, parishes, they come over and trained with us. And we had something like, we had something like 14 or 15 MPs to go to this school, and only 7 of us graduated.
Oh, wow.
And same with their departments. They were training with us, with their department, and they had X amount of police officers, and they canned half of them also, because you had to go.
Only a few made it through.
Yeah, you had to learn how to figure eights and all that kind of stuff. And,
that's awesome.
And with the Harley Davidsons back then, they were made by AMF, and they were 75 models. And our uniforms were we had olive drab uniforms, and everybody does. I mean, everybody had olive drab. You didn't see all this camouflage and stuff. Only people who wore camouflage in the Army was probably Special Forces or the Rangers, and in Vietnam. And then, but I don't care if it's the Army, the Navy, like the Seabees, or the Marines, Air Force, they all wore olive drab. All our uniforms were the same, but just U.S. Army or Marines or whatever. But anyway, we also used to have a khaki uniform. It was a real tan uniform, shirt and everything else. And we always had our boots bloused and everything. That's part of either an airborne or you're an MP to have that done, to wear that. And the push rod covers on these Harleys was always coming loose and throwing oil everywhere. And I still have my uniform. And then down here on the sides here, the push rod covers would come loose and start spraying oil. So we had to go through like I call it a first echelon maintenance training with them bikes too, to keep things like push rod covers tightened, because they vibrate and they work loose. Yeah. So I still have that uniform.
That's
with
funny.
oil splatters all over the side. So.
That's funny.
But anyway, so I worked traffic my last year and a half. And then when we went on the field, to go train, I would go out with my unit and do what we did before, but we always had things out there, like I was a traffic accident investigator, and then, and I'm talking about a reconstructionist. That's what I had to go through. It's coefficient of friction, and I measured tar tracks and all that garbage back in the day, and it was a little harder to do that than what they do with today. Today they got your formulas. I wasn't great in math either, but they had formulas back then to figure out your speed of a car when they had a wreck, for instance, or whatever. Well, so I'd go out and do my thing, you know. But if we had an accident, you know, they'd pull me off of there and go over to take care of whatever it was, you know, and because the military vehicles were always getting in accidents. And even when I was I was home one night to sleep, and I get called, and we have an accident on a tank trail, which is about 25 miles from town and out in the middle of nowhere. So I have to go to the motor pool, get me a Jeep, get my flashlight, a map, and a compass, and they give me our grid coordinates, and you go out at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning to determine why a Jeep was flying down with blackout lights. I don't know if you know what that is, and there's special lights on vehicles that they have a real dim, so like running around with your parking lights on.
Okay.
But a little dimmer than that. But they had a whole convoy of armored personnel carriers on this trail, and these people these guys in this Jeep didn't know it, and they come flying down that trail, and all of a sudden, wham! They got medevaced out in a helicopter, and by the time I got there, I had to do my thing there and take pictures and all that kind of stuff and everything else out in the middle of nowhere, depending on what the weather is. And you had to, and them tank trails are terrible. I mean, you talk about four-wheel drive. I think I had to get pulled out anyway. So, but anyway, I can get rambling on about that. But yeah, I was on the traffic and rode a motorcycle and investigated accidents.
Yeah,
but then I went and played Army in the woods too. So.
So what are some life lessons you learned from your time in the military?
Oh, I learned a lot of things in the military.
Are you glad you joined?
Yes. I encourage anybody that's wanting to be in law enforcement and they really want to do that, is to do that. As you know, when I got out of the Army, I went into the Indiana National Guard for a year. And I was in an NP detachment out of Indianapolis.
Okay.
And their job was a little different. They were the physical security detachment, which is they went around and inspected armories and stuff like that. And also they did military investigations, you know, as far as any criminal or anything with something was missing out of an armory we're inspecting and all this. And but I went in there for active for a year, but it conflicted with the police department here. And back then we only got one 4-day weekend a month, and if you were in the National Guard or the Army Reserve or the Air Force or whatever, that was your weekend.
Oh, wow.
So we looked at 100 years as not getting a weekend off ever.
Wow.
So, but yeah, I learned a lot. And like I said, if someone's interested in law enforcement, they ought to look into that first.
Yeah.
And like I said, you know, as you well know, I've gone to Connorsville, and I was there for 36 years, and went through the ranks and retired as chief.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, so tell us a little bit, like, what do you do now that you're retired?
I work for Urban's Funeral Home.
There you go. Enjoying retirement?
Well, yeah, I would try, but you know, it's under these times, you know, it's kind of rough. You know, the money's tight and everything else, and you know, when you retire, you know, and I think everybody out in TV land there knows what I'm talking about. When you retire, you got to do something.
Right.
You can't sit down. You sit down and do nothing, you're going to waste away and die.
Right.
You got to keep moving, and
Yes.
so find something to keep you busy.
Yeah. And so you travel quite a bit, right?
Yeah, I travel. I go up to see my kids in Alaska, and then I'm in West Virginia a lot.
Are they both in Alaska?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Yeah.
So do you like Alaska?
I love Alaska. And if anybody knows
Not
me,
too cold?
no, not where my kids live. I mean, it's comparable to here. But my daughter lives in Juneau, my son lives in Kodiak, but my daughter was in the Coast Guard.
Oh, she was?
And she was stationed in Kodiak back in the about mid 70s, or not 70s, I'm
I was
sorry.
gonna say.
90s.
Yeah.
I'm 20 years, I'm getting a little senile too. So. But, so yeah, I'm up there a lot.
So she was Coast Guard in the 90s
Yeah.
and was stationed there, so she just loved it? And
Yes, but she put her time in and got out. But yeah, she was on the fire department up there, and she was on a crash crew. And
Wow.
she went through I think she went through Goodfellow Air Force Base for crash training or fire school, and was there for like I want to say 18 weeks maybe, something like that. And anyway, she put her time in and got out. And so she lives in Juneau now. My son lives in Kodiak.
Okay.
So
And what does he do?
he has a construction company.
Oh,
He
wow.
works construction, and he married a young lady up there. She's a Lutic native, and she's I'm real proud of her. She's a PhD graduate of Alaska State, but she got her bachelor's at Brown University in Rhode Island, and she's an anthropologist.
Oh, wow.
And so she's the director of the museum, and she's taught at the local college there also. But they got two girls, and my son's got the two girls, and then my daughter has two boys.
Oh, wow.
So ranging from like 21 to 12.
Well, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you get to go up there a lot. Well, Dave, I want to thank you for sharing your experience with us today. I want to thank you for your service and your sacrifice, and I appreciate you coming on the show.
Oh, no problem. It was my honor.
All right. Well, be sure to tune in next month when we will highlight another veteran from Fayette County.